can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your identity, positioning, and assumptions, and how this influences the way you interact with children of diverse cultures and backgrounds?
Ko te tuatahi he uri tēnei no te aroa Ngāti Rau kawana wairi ki Ngāti Apa. I also have hononga to Italy and England. Both my nan's whakapapa Māori and both of my koro whakapapa European. So I guess I'm lucky, for lack of a better word, to be able to stand in both worlds. And by this I mean that despite my whakapapa Māori, my skin colour allows me to stand with the marginalised and those doing the marginalising. However, I see my positioning as an opportunity. When standing in my Indigenous shoes, I can understand and aid our tauira Māori and hold space for them by drawing from my own lived experiences. Whakawhanaungatanga is a big one for me. To know my tauira is to know their whānau and their lives outside of school. And I guess this can be likened to many diverse cultures, ethnicities, religions, etc. At times, some tauira may not fit into the box of their ethnic roots, what they look like, how they act, and speaking from experience. So ensuring there is care around those assumptions. And one korero that resonates with me is I whakapapa, therefore I am. I can also step into my Pākehā roots, and I guess there are discrepancies with how my ancestors from this lineage failed to understand ngai Māori and them and their whole world. I assumed that everyone knew what colonisation was and the impacts of that. They were educated about history, current affairs, but often people have no idea or no awareness that we are a society built on assimilation and colonisation. But ultimately, I think diversity adds richness and depth, which helps us become broader individuals. And working at nights in school, I love that there is diversity, and I think of those other Indigenous groups, Indigenous Canadians, Aboriginals, Pacific Island brothers and sisters who have also been marginalised within their homelands. I understand that often they go into spaces and places where they need to suppress their identity or their ethnic beliefs, and so I love this idea of using culture to flourish, whether it be Māori, Pacifica. How do we enable so all can benefit, which leads to a more equitable society?
In your view, what are some important considerations relating to cultural responsiveness and relational pedagogy?
I guess this allows me to reflect on my own practice. I favour creating normatives as opposed to one-offs, and by this I mean to not confine the likes of matariki, te wiki o te reo Māori, mahuru Māori, Waitangi Day to 1 day, 1 week or 1 month, and to make it the normative within my classroom, provide mātauranga Māori throughout all seasons, and to make information resources available throughout the year. I favour the place-based and community-based pedagogy where learners and educators connect with local Indigenous people, significant cultural sites and lands, as well as local pūrākau. I think experience is a key driver towards understanding and comprehension, to be able to explore the lands, talk to the Indigenous people, talk to the locals, and imagine what history was like on that land. Does more than reading information from a textbook, from Google, etc. I think this pātai involves a lot of self-reflection of pedagogy as a kaiako. Do I have the right knowledge to inform my tauira of their cultural roots? For example, the right understanding of tikanga, the right terminology, the right comprehension, pronunciation. I think it is important to educate in a mana-enhancing way. And this can arise by confronting my own thinking and my own unconscious bias. Speaking from experience, I am a fair-skinned Māori. I remember being called white privilege by a whānau member, and this was years ago, despite my whakapapa Māori. And it was the manner in which it was said which hurt me, and it stuck with me to this day. So addressing racism or discriminatory comments within schools, within the classroom, is a good step to take. Dr. Anne Mills' colouring in the White Book highlights the common occurrence of Pākehā entering the teaching profession with little or no understanding of race or racism, but fully equipped with misinformation and stereotypes, which they have accumulated over the years, such as Māori Days Off, Pacifica students are FOB, etc., but they all add up. And too often subtle, unconscious, or even loud racism gets swept under the carpet, so to call this out, whether loud or quiet, can make a huge difference.
Can you share 3 examples of kayako being culturally responsive and why these have stood out to you?
One example is during my secondary school experience, I had a history teacher who activated change and stood against the normative. Despite her Pākehā whakapapa, she understood her positionality and privileges as a Pākehā. She educated us on unconscious biases, New Zealand histories, the effects of colonisation and assimilation, and I believe there was power in her teaching because it allowed us as tauira to see her acknowledgement of the ill treatment of received by Māori back in the days, and also still to this day. She took our history and said, no, what happened to Māori and to our Indigenous brothers and sisters across the world was wrong, and I can use my positionality as a history teacher to educate, and I think there is power in that. Also, working at a kura last year, Areorua Kaiako at Banquet Primary School, who goes above and beyond for her akonga. She kickstarted a kapaaka rōpū because she noticed that her akonga were making the wrong decisions during break time. She ran practices during break time, and her akonga willingly attended because this kaiako believed in their talents and supported their progress through kapahaka. They were passionate and they had something to work towards that reflected their worldviews, and they ended up competing in a competition with other schools, and they were really proud. Also, my MT, who, on reflection of my practicum at night in school, my MT is a strong example of a culturally responsive kaiako. Knighton School is one of the most ethnically diverse schools in Aotearoa and has a number of akonga from all walks of life. We have 12 different ethnicities within our classroom alone, and often when they come to kura, there is a language barrier between the kaiako and her akonga. However, she is very proactive at meeting their needs and making them feel safe and heard in their learning space. An example being a little Afghanistan boy who recently migrated to New Zealand from Afghanistan 5 months ago. He has no English, and so my MT really supported him. She learnt common Persian commands and words, has visual aids to help him remember routine and structures within the classroom. And I think a key theme is the effort. So all 3 kaiako go above and beyond for their tauira, accommodating them so they can feel like they can show up as their authentic selves within their learning space, and pulling away from those checkbox, I'm just doing it because it's the right thing to do, stepping away from the normative. I think that really shows that they care.
Select one of the frameworks discussed in our workshops which have been specifically designed to support Māori Pacifica learners. Explain why the framework appeals to you and potential challenges in terms of implementation and possible solutions.
I chose the Niho Taniwha framework. I was drawn to it because Whai Melanie discusses how important Māori success is for our rangatahi. They are essentially the mokopuna o Nainei, the future of today. And there's a huge focus on tauira Māori and what kaiako can do to accommodate them as opposed to the other way around. I also like this framework because it makes us question, how do we keep pushing beyond? How can we continue to be culturally responsive in all areas of life? Yes, it's great to be culturally responsive in the classroom, but what does that look like when going to the shop, when visiting whānau, when travelling the world? So it extends beyond introducing kupu metaphors, myths within the classroom. It is whakawhanaungatanga, building relationships, it's understanding socio-political history and challenging beliefs and behaviours. Some potential challenges of implementation. There may be some lack of awareness from kaiako that this framework works for tauira Māori. It can often be assumed that tauira Māori would just fit into Pākehā systems, but Māori have been doing so since the arrival of Europeans. It hasn't worked, so how can we expect Pākehā education frameworks to work also for Māori tauira? Mentioned in an article by Tina Ngata, she states the process of colonisation created the space for you to reside here in Aotearoa, you meaning Pākehā. So for non-Māori, it can be quite challenging to reshift this thinking to accommodate to Māori, and it can also be quite uncomfortable. Another challenge may be sustainability. How can we ensure that this framework is being used for tauira Māori, that kaiako are enforcing the use of whai, of ako, of mau and tipu to inform their learning and their stance within their learning environment. Some solutions highlighted in Whai Melanie's reading. There's one particular extract that discusses the impacts of validation can make. One kaiako stating, they, tauira, are listening and they are watching what you validate. A solution is to validate the value of different perspectives, to validate, another example in her reading is, you don't have to be Māori to teach the value of identity of mātauranga Māori and te reo Māori. So create opportunities, accommodate tauira Māori in their learning, creating spaces to discuss identity, its importance, differences in identity among ākonga, all ākonga within the classroom, letting ākonga inform the teaching. It is a kaiako responsibility. And it is reiterated by the government that we should be doing 1 hour of reading, writing, maths, but we have control as kaiako over what we teach. To intertwine mātauranga Māori with science, mahi toi with maths, is nothing new. Intersecting two areas of the curriculum may be the solution to sustainability, and involving whānau community within this decision-making process. Kia ora.